Welcome back to the Retro Workshop. Well, it's been over a year now since I completed the restoration of my Sinclair C5, so I thought it was time for a bit of an update. So please join me as I make a few small tweaks to this fine machine and take it out on a proper test ride as I attempt my commute to work. What this video series is missing is a proper road test, so I've set myself the challenge of using the C5 to commute to work, which is about 8 miles from my house. But before I do that, there's a few small changes that I'd like to make. Now, first of all, the brakes on the C5 are terrible. I'd quite like to get some disc brakes fitted perhaps to the rear, but I'd rather like to keep the machine original. So for now, I'm going to try out some replacement front brake blocks. These are made from a softer material, so hopefully that will make a difference.
I bought these blocks from eBay from a seller that usually has a few C5 parts for sale. And with the C5 up on the workbench, you just need a 10mm spanner to undo the old blocks. These black ones I also bought from eBay for about £3, but they're made of a harder material and this isn't recommended. The C5 front wheel is made of plastic and harder blocks can cause the wheel to heat up and even melt. In fact, you can see that my wheel is a little distorted in places. You could also install a wheel with a metal rim if you can get hold of one of those. You just need to check that the wheel isn't catching at any point when you rotate it. And I'll take it for a quick spin and then make another adjustment. Now, I had intended to do a highly scientific stopping distance test out on the street, but at this point the C5 let me down. The electrics failed and the pod lights went out, so it was back to the workshop.
Abort. And I've managed to provoke the fault just by dropping it gently on the workbench, so let's see if we can provoke it. So this is looking like some sort of loose connection, and of course I've been here before with this connector at the rear of the pod, although it doesn't seem to be the culprit on this occasion. So if I move around to the rear, that's me just tapping my fingers on the control box. So it looks like we need to have the lid of the control box off and have a bit of a poke around in there. The culprit seems to be the red connector. If I waggle that one around, the lights come and go on the pod, or they stay on and we get that flashing left-hand set of lights.
And there are some white deposits on the red connector, likely from some liquid that's got into the control box. So I cleaned both sides of the connector and inserted it a few times to clean the contacts. This made some improvement and the motor no longer cuts out. But if I waggle the wire, the display flashes or goes out. Okay, so it's time to get serious and start pulling it all apart. The likely candidate is the red connector, but I'm not leaving anything to chance as I don't want any problems on my 8-mile commute to work. These 7 and 8mm deep sockets make light work of removing the wires in the control box. The lower lid is normally riveted on, but I drilled these out and fitted screws in an earlier video. The connector and solder joints on the rear of the board all look in good shape, no sign of any dried joints. Just to be safe, I'll touch up the joints with fresh solder. And clean off the board with IPA. This didn't fix the fault, so I went ahead and replaced the red connector. Although this is a standard 0.1-inch pitch plug, it's nice to keep things original, and I've bought a couple of red AMP brand plugs from eBay. For larger quantities it may be cheaper to get them from RS, who also sell the official crimp tool. I've used a cheaper improvised tool, and I'll link to Paul Grice's video where he demonstrates connector replacement with it.
Now, the original red connector did show some signs of corrosion. I wonder whether water's got in through this cable entry here. Normally on a C5 that would be filled with some bits of foam, and that's missing from my C5. So before I put the cover back on, I'm going to put this bit of foam in there, and that hopefully should keep a little bit of water out if I go through any puddles. And now for a bit of a correction. In one of my earlier videos I showed some modifications to the pod to reduce its susceptibility to damage from electrostatic discharge, static electricity, and this involved attaching a resistor and some catch diodes to different pins on the IC. Now I've done a little bit more reading and reviewed this, and I think I made a bit of a mistake. The unofficial service manual from which I got the information was a bit vague and a bit brief about the catch diodes. It said to attach them to IC1/4. At the time I thought this was pins 1 and 4, but on further examination I believe this is actually only intended to be added to pin 4. So I'm going to go ahead and remove the 2 diodes from pin 1. Just like a car, the C5 was available with a number of optional extras, including a seat cover, indicators and a high-vis mast. But the one accessory I wanted to get my hands on was a horn, just to let people know that you're there, as it says in the highway code. In other words, get out of the way. Now, I found full details of fitting this online, and it was relatively simple, especially as a lot of the wires are already installed lying in wait, ready to be connected up.
The first job is to carefully put the C5 on its side without the battery. Underneath you should find a bundle of connectors tucked out of the way. Locate the brown and green wires, each has got a white stripe, and poke them through next to the steering column. I've soldered some short leads onto a micro switch. Simon Funnel kindly sent me a 3D printed bracket which I've used to mount the switch on the handlebar under the right rubber grip. And he's made the 3D files available on Thingiverse if you want to try this mod yourself. I used red crimp terminals on the wires from the switch and connected these to the green and brown wires. At the rear of the C5 with the boot removed, locate the other end of these wires and also the white wire with the black stripe. I then fitted some crimp terminals and connected the black and white wire to the green and white wire. This gives us a switched 0 volts line on the brown wire. I also put a crimp terminal on the red and white wire. This is a feed of 12 volts to power the horn. I used a small 12 volt buzzer and extended its leads. These leads connect as shown in the rear of the C5. I located the buzzer next to the light switch and tidied up the wires in the back of the C5 with some adhesive metal cable clips.
And there we go, horn all fitted. Now I took this out for a spin round the block, and unfortunately when you're under speed you can't hear this buzzer. So I've got this from eBay. It's a moped horn, and it says on the back here that it's 100 dB, so that sounds pretty loud to me. So I'll get that fitted. And it was just a simple matter of drilling a new hole and fitting the wires as before. Yeah, that's definitely a bit louder. Okay, so time now for a bit of a road test, and I've set myself the challenge of commuting to work. Now it's a distance of about 8 miles, so we'll see how I get on. And I'm doing it for charity, a charity run in aid of the National Museum of Computing down the road in Bletchley. Now I'm a bit apprehensive because obviously it let me down badly just 2 days ago, and I've been working feverishly to get it back in action, but it seems solid now. It's a little bit tight on space in the old C5. Around the back here in the boot I've just got meagre provisions. Normally I'd take a backpack to work with my laptop and various other bits and pieces, but I've had to slim that down to a Tesco bag for life. I've got my work pass, a mobile phone charger and a few other bits and pieces, a packet of crisps as well, and of course a few of the camera filming bits and bobs. So I've got about an hour and a half to get to work. It's about 8 miles, so let's see how I get on.
I'm using the Redway, which is a shared cycle lane and pedestrian route around Milton Keynes, and I'm trying to avoid the roads where possible. The brakes are definitely better. I did adjust the rear brake as well, but the new front blocks make a distinct improvement. Of course, you've got to pedal a little to get the C5 moving before engaging the motor to avoid damage.
Morning.
Even on a slight incline, I can see the left bar graph is in the red, so I'm helping the motor out with a bit of extra pedalling. I wouldn't want to be down there on the A5 amongst all that fast moving traffic. And the C5 seems to put a smile on people's faces.
Morning.
You're very close to the ground in the C5, so there's a sense of speed even if you're not actually going that fast. Despite the Lotus engineered chassis promising a smooth ride, you do feel every little bump in the pathway.
Well, we've made it to Starbucks okay. I was going to go through the drive-through, but as you can see there was quite a line of traffic and I didn't fancy sitting with all those exhaust fumes, and that was cited as one of the main drawbacks back in the 80s of the C5, that you were positioned, the driver was positioned exactly at London bus exhaust height. I just does highlight one of the shortcomings of the C5. There's nowhere to put your coffee. I'm sure that could be soon fixed with a little adhesive cup holder though. Okay, so we've taken it on the roads now for a little bit just to experience the thrill. This part of the road system is only 30 miles an hour, so it's not as risky as the other main roads in Milton Keynes. We've made it into the this is the centre of Milton Keynes. Really need to finish this drink. Not quite as hairy as you might think, actually. Got a bus behind me. And one of the famous roundabouts in Milton Keynes. Oh. And I'm just going past the main railway station here in Milton Keynes, and you can see a large line of electric scooters parked up. Now this is one of the first towns in the UK to allow electric scooters on the, I think you're allowed to ride them on the road, certainly on the redways as well, but they are speed limited to 15 miles an hour, which is plenty enough if you're mixing with pedestrians, old ladies and little dogs. And of course that's the same speed as the top speed of a stock Sinclair C5. So the C5 was ahead of the game back in 1985.
As I said earlier, I'm using the Redway, which is a 200-kilometre network for bikes as well as people on foot, so called because of the red tarmac. It dips down to go under the roads, so you pick up some speed on the way down. But the C5 really struggles on the way up. In fact, it almost stops. So again, I'm reaching for the pedals, and without gears it can be quite hard work. On the flat it's a different story and the machine runs beautifully. This perhaps explains the popularity of the C5 in the Netherlands.
Well, we've hit a bit of a problem here. There's a bit of a flood in the cycleway, and I don't know how deep it is, but I'm not going to take the C5 through it, so I'm going to have to go and find another way. Okay, so I'm about, well over halfway to work now. Despite the weather forecast saying it was going to be fine, it's in fact starting to rain, and the battery level on the C5 is okay. We're still on green, the second of the two green indicators. Slight problem with the left-hand display though. I'm slightly worried because although the different LEDs are lighting up to show the current in the motor and they do change, they are flashing. Now I was thinking that might be the temperature first stage alarm, but I think it's supposed to beep as well. So unless there's a problem with the buzzer, then I'm not quite sure what's going on, but we'll have to keep an eye on that one. Dead pigeon.
Well, the rain got steadily worse. When I arrived in Kingston near the big Tesco supermarket, it was chucking it down. But I stopped to introduce the C5 to some 2020 future tech. The Starship Robots. These autonomous vehicles can be booked to make home deliveries around Milton Keynes. It really is the city of the future. And then the final leg of my journey in the rain to work.
Okay, so I've arrived at work, and it's been quite an interesting journey. I've seen a few people along the way, a few smiles from a few people, a few strange looks from others. Well, I think you're going to have to use your own judgment as to whether the C5 is a success or not based on my journey. Look, I've arrived at work, I'm soaking wet, and it just goes to show one of the major drawbacks of the C5. She's certainly a fair weather machine. Anyway, I'm soaked to the skin, so I'm going to leave it there. Hopefully you've enjoyed this video. If you have, please do give it a thumbs up and consider subscribing to see more videos, more occasional videos on old technology. Bye for now.